November 1943. The world is drowning in blood. From the frozen steppes of Stalingrad to the scorched deserts of North Africa, from the island-hopping horror of the Pacific to the smouldering ruins of bombed-out cities across Europe, a World War II has become a meat grinder consuming millions. And in the heart of this global carnage, three men hold the fate of humanity in their hands. Joseph Stalin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, the Big Three, they are about to meet in secret. A meeting so crucial, so unprecedented, that it could determine whether freedom survives or fascism conquers the world. The location: Tehran, Iran, a city perched between empires, a crossroads of ancient civilizations, now about to become the stage for the most important diplomatic summit in human history. But someone else knows about this meeting. Deep in the shadows of Nazi Germany, in the marble halls of the Reich Security main office in Berlin, another plan is taking shape. A plan so audacious, so impossibly bold that even speaking its name could be considered madness. Operation Long Jump, the mission, simple, terrifying, absolute: assassinate all three Allied leaders in one strike at the same time. If Operation Long Jump had succeeded, the entire course of World War II might have changed. The alliance against Hitler could have shattered. The invasion of Europe might never have happened. The atomic bomb might have fallen into different hands. The world you know today might not exist. Yet for decades this story remained buried, classified, whispered about in the footnotes of history books and the memoirs of aging spies. Some called it a myth, others insisted it was real. But the truth is far more compelling than either extreme, because Operation Long Jump wasn't just a Nazi fantasy scribbled on paper and forgotten. It was a meticulously planned military operation involving Germany's most elite commandos, its most cunning spies, and one of Hitler's favorite soldiers, a man who had already achieved the impossible once before. The question isn't whether the plot existed. Documents prove it did. The real question is far more chilling: how close did it come to succeeding, and if it was stopped, who stopped it and how? This is the story of the secret war within the war. A tale of espionage and counter-espionage, of assassins and the shadows that hunted them, of one man's desperate attempt to prevent the murder of the century. It's a story that almost vanished from history entirely. Until now. The year is 1943, and somewhere in the darkness between Berlin and Tehran, the fate of the world hangs by a thread. Music swells and transitions. To understand Operation Long Jump, you must first understand the mind of Adolf Hitler in the autumn of 1943. And that mind is fracturing under the weight of catastrophic failure. The invincible Wehrmacht, once poised to conquer all of Europe and beyond, is bleeding from 1,000 wounds. At Stalingrad, an entire German army was encircled and destroyed. Nearly 300,000 men swallowed by the Russian winter. In North Africa, Field Marshal Rommel's Afrika Korps has been crushed. In Italy, Mussolini, Hitler's oldest ally, has been overthrown and arrested. The war is turning, and Hitler knows it. In the Reich Security main office on Prince Albrechtstrasse in Berlin, SS Obergruppenführer Ernst Kaltenbrunner presides over a vast empire of terror. Cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless, Kaltenbrunner commands the entire Nazi intelligence apparatus. The Gestapo, the SD, the network of spies and informants that stretches across occupied Europe and beyond. Kaltenbrunner understands what Hitler desperately needs: not another conventional military victory, but a masterstroke, something that would shatter the Allied coalition in a single, devastating blow. Something that would prove the superiority of German intelligence and special operations. Something that would change everything. The seed of Operation Long Jump is planted in conversations between these men, conversations held behind closed doors, in rooms swept for listening devices, where only the most trusted officers are permitted to enter. They speak in low voices about an opportunity, An unprecedented opportunity. Allied intelligence has been intercepted, decoded. The big three are planning to meet, somewhere in neutral or Allied-controlled territory. The exact location isn't yet confirmed, but one city keeps appearing in the traffic. Tehran. Hitler's eyes light up when he hears this. Tehran, the capital of Iran, a country that has already been jointly occupied by British and Soviet forces. A city far from the eastern or western fronts, relatively secure and therefore perfect for a high-level summit. If Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill could be eliminated there all at once, the war would be thrown into chaos. But who could possibly execute such a mission? There is only one name that matters. Only one man with the audacity, the skill, and the proven track record to attempt something this insane. SS Sturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny. Skorzeny is a legend in the making. Standing 6'4" with a distinctive dueling scar across his left cheek, he looks like he was carved from granite by a Norse god. But it's not his appearance that makes him dangerous, it's what he's already accomplished. Just months earlier, in September 1943, Skorzeny led a daring commando raid to rescue Benito Mussolini from his mountain prison at Gran Sasso. Using gliders to land directly on a mountaintop, Skorzeny and his men snatched Il Duce from under the noses of his Italian captors without firing a shot. Hitler called it the greatest commando operation in history. Now he wants Skorzeny to do something even more spectacular. Skorzeny is summoned to Hitler's headquarters. The Führer himself explains the mission, the opportunity, the stakes. Skorzeny listens with the calm focus of a professional soldier, but inside, his mind is already racing through the logistics. Tehran is over 2,000 miles from German-controlled territory. Getting a team there undetected would require crossing multiple hostile borders, evading British and Soviet intelligence networks, and operating in a city crawling with security forces. But Skorzeny doesn't refuse. He never refuses. Instead, he begins to plan. The recruitment process is shrouded in absolute secrecy. Skorzeny handpicks his team from the Waffen-SS, from Brandenburg Division commandos, from agents who have operated behind enemy lines in the Soviet Union. These are not ordinary soldiers. They are men who speak multiple languages, who can pass as locals, who have killed with their bare hands and slept soundly afterward. The plan begins to take shape. The team will be inserted into Iran covertly, possibly by parachute, possibly by infiltrating through Turkey or Soviet-controlled territory using false identities. They will establish safe houses in Tehran, conduct surveillance on the conference locations, and identify the optimal moment to strike. Weapons will be smuggled in piece by piece. Escape routes will be planned, though everyone understands this might be a one-way mission. Meanwhile, Nazi intelligence officers in neutral countries begin activating their networks. Agents in Turkey start gathering information about routes into Iran. Contacts in Afghanistan are quietly approached. Radio operators prepare codes and frequencies. Forged documents, passports, travel papers, identity cards are meticulously created in the workshops of the Reich Security main office. But here's what makes Operation Long Jump truly terrifying. It wasn't just about assassination. The plan included contingencies for maximum chaos. If the primary strike failed, secondary targets would be hit. Bombs could be placed at the conference venues. Snipers could be positioned in overlooking buildings. Poison could be introduced into the water supply of the embassies. The goal wasn't just to kill 3 men. It was to decapitate the Allied leadership and plunge the enemy coalition into political paralysis. In war rooms across Berlin, maps of Tehran are spread across tables. Photographs of the British and Soviet embassies are studied. Intelligence reports pile up. Everyone involved knows they are planning something unprecedented in the history of modern warfare. And then the orders are given. Operation Long Jump is authorized to proceed. The assassins begin their journey east. Music transitions to ominous, suspenseful tone. Tehran in November 1943 is a city transformed by war. Once a sleepy capital of ancient Persia, it has become a vital crossroads for the Allied war effort. American trucks rumble through its narrow streets, carrying supplies bound for the Soviet Union as part of the Lend-Lease program. British officers drink tea in hotel lobbies. Soviet agents watch everyone with suspicious eyes. The city hums with the barely contained energy of competing intelligence services, black market dealers, and refugees from across the Middle East. The architecture is a mixture of old and new, ancient bazaars with their labyrinthine alleys standing alongside modern administrative buildings. Flat-roofed houses cluster together, creating a maze of rooftops perfect for observation or escape. The air smells of diesel fuel, cooking spices, and dust. By day, the city bustles with commerce. By night, it becomes a city of shadows. This is where the big three will meet. This is where history will be made or unmade. The security preparations are unlike anything Tehran has ever seen. The Soviet NKVD, Stalin's feared secret police, arrives in force. They sweep hotels, they interrogate locals. They establish concentric rings of security around the Soviet embassy, where Stalin will stay. British intelligence officers from MI6 coordinate with their Soviet counterparts, an uneasy alliance born of necessity. American Secret Service agents, less experienced in the darker arts of espionage, do their best to keep up. The conference is scheduled for late November. Roosevelt is sailing across the Atlantic, then will fly to Cairo before proceeding to Tehran. Churchill is already in the Middle East preparing for the summit. Stalin, paranoid as always, has made the journey from Moscow by train and plane, changing routes at the last minute to confuse potential assassins. But are there assassins? That's the question on everyone's mind. Rumors swirl through the intelligence community. British agents report unusual German activity in Turkey. Soviet spies in Bulgaria send warnings about suspicious travelers heading east. Radio intercepts hint at a major operation in the planning stages, but nothing is concrete, nothing is certain. Meanwhile, across the city in rented rooms and hidden safe houses, other eyes are watching. German agents have indeed infiltrated Tehran. Some arrived weeks earlier, posing as businessmen or Turkish merchants. Others crossed the border from Turkey or Afghanistan with forged papers. They blend into the cosmopolitan chaos of wartime Tehran, just another group of foreigners in a city full of foreigners. They observe the Soviet embassy. They note the guard rotations. They photograph the streets. They identify potential ambush points. The plan is coming together, but they are not alone in the shadows. Every intelligence service in Tehran is hunting for threats. The city has become a chessboard where dozens of invisible games are being played simultaneously. Soviet agents tail British officers, suspecting them of plotting against Stalin. British agents watch Soviet movements, worried about communist infiltration, and everyone is looking for Germans. The tension builds like a gathering storm. Roosevelt's motorcade will have to drive through the city from the American embassy to the Soviet compound. Churchill will make the same journey. These brief transits, cars moving through narrow streets protected only by armed guards and timing, represent the operation's most vulnerable moments. One well-placed bomb, one sniper with a clear line of sight. 1 second of confusion, that's all it would take. In the bazaars, in the tea houses, in the quiet corners where men speak in whispers, information is bought and sold. Who is asking questions about the foreign embassies? Who has been seen sketching maps? Who paid in gold coins instead of local currency? The intelligence networks pulse with activity, each side probing for weakness, searching for the enemy they can feel but cannot yet see. The Germans know the Allies are searching for them. The Allies know the Germans are somewhere in the city. It's a deadly game of hide-and-seek where the stakes are 3 human lives that carry the weight of millions. And then, in the midst of this shadow war, one man discovers something that will change everything. Music shifts to tense, urgent rhythm. His name is Nikolai Ivanovich Kuznetsov, and he is one of the most remarkable spies of World War II. Born in the Urals, Kuznetsov doesn't look like the typical Soviet intelligence officer. He's handsome, charming, fluent in perfect High German without a trace of accent. He can discuss German philosophy, quote Goethe, and navigate the social intricacies of Wehrmacht officers as if he were born in Bavaria. In fact, Kuznetsov has spent years operating behind German lines, posing as Oberleutnant Paul Siebert of the Wehrmacht, infiltrating the highest levels of Nazi military administration in occupied Ukraine. It is November 1943. Kuznetsov is in Rivne, a city in western Ukraine that serves as a major German administrative center. He moves through the officers' clubs and official functions with practiced ease, always listening, always gathering intelligence. His mission is to identify targets for partisan raids and collect information about German military movements. But on this particular evening, Kuznetsov overhears something extraordinary. He's at a reception, a glass of wine in hand, surrounded by German officers celebrating someone's promotion. The alcohol flows freely, tongues loosen, and in the corner, 2 SS officers are speaking in low voices about something big. Something happening soon, something in Tehran. Kuznetsov edges closer, pretending to examine a painting on the wall. He catches fragments of the conversation, the Big Three, November meeting, special operation, Skorzeny himself. His blood runs cold. He forces himself to remain calm, to keep his expression neutral. He laughs at a joke someone tells. He refills his wine glass, but his mind is racing. Later that night, in the safe house where he maintains his radio equipment, Kuznetsov encodes an urgent message to his handlers in Moscow. He reports what he heard, the hints about a German operation targeting the Tehran conference. The details are sketchy, but the implication is clear. The Germans are planning something catastrophic. The message travels through the Soviet intelligence network. Within hours, it reaches the NKVD headquarters in Moscow. Within a day, it's on Stalin's desk. Stalin reads the report with his characteristic paranoia. Is this credible? Could the Germans really be planning to assassinate him and his allies in Tehran? Or is this disinformation designed to disrupt the conference? Stalin trusts no one, not even his own intelligence services. But he also can't afford to ignore a threat this serious. He orders immediate action. The NKVD station in Tehran is put on high alert. Every available agent is mobilized. The security cordon around the conference venues is tripled. And most importantly, the hunt begins in earnest. Soviet counterintelligence had already been searching for German agents in Tehran, but now they have confirmation that something is planned. The search intensifies. Every hotel is swept again. Every foreigner is checked and rechecked. Informants are activated across the city. The NKVD knows how to find enemies. They've been doing it for years across the Soviet Union. Now they turn that terrifying efficiency toward Tehran. British intelligence receives a formal briefing from their Soviet counterparts. The British are skeptical. Stalin is famous for seeing conspiracies everywhere, but they can't ignore the warning either. Churchill's protection detail is reinforced. MI6 agents begin their own investigation, cross-referencing the Soviet intelligence with their own sources. The Americans are the last to be fully briefed, partly because Roosevelt's security team is less integrated with the British and Soviet intelligence apparatus. But when they finally learn about the potential threat, they react with alarm. The Secret Service insists that Roosevelt should stay at the American embassy, not the Soviet compound where Stalin wants him. The debate rages for days. Meanwhile, across Tehran, the net is tightening. Soviet agents working from the intelligence Kuznetsov provided and their own surveillance begin to identify suspicious individuals. A man who asked too many questions about embassy security. Another who was seen photographing buildings near the conference route. A third whose papers, upon closer inspection, seem just a little too perfect. The arrests begin quietly. Suspects are taken from their hotels in the middle of the night. Some are innocent, just unlucky foreigners in the wrong place at the wrong time, but others, under interrogation, reveal more troubling information. One captured agent, facing the prospect of Soviet interrogation techniques, admits he was sent by German intelligence. Another reveals details about radio frequencies and contact protocols. Piece by piece, the NKVD begins to reconstruct the German operation. But the most crucial question remains unanswered. Is the threat truly neutralized, or are there other agents still in the city, waiting for their moment to strike? Kuznetsov, back in occupied Ukraine, continues his dangerous work. He will never know the full impact of his intelligence report. He will never know that his overheard conversation in that German officers' club might have saved the lives of 3 world leaders and altered the course of history. Tragically, Kuznetsov himself will be killed in action just a few months later, in March 1944, during a firefight with German forces. He's only 33 years old. But in November 1943, his warning sets in motion a silent hunt through the streets of Tehran. Music becomes tense, building to climax. The Tehran conference opens on November 28, 1943, under the tightest security in the history of diplomatic summits. Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill meet for the first time as a unified alliance. They discuss the opening of a second front in Europe. They plan the invasion of France. They debate the shape of the post-war world. In those rooms, with maps spread across tables and whiskey glasses in hand, the future is being written. But outside those rooms, in the streets and alleys of Tehran, another drama unfolds. Soviet and British intelligence officers maintain constant surveillance. Every rooftop is watched. Every vehicle approaching the embassy districts is stopped and searched. Plainclothes agents blend into crowds, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. The security cordon is so tight that even legitimate diplomats complain about the delays and inspections. According to Soviet intelligence reports declassified decades later, NKVD agents arrested multiple German operatives in the days leading up to and during the conference. The exact number varies depending on the source, some say 6, others claim more. These men were interrogated thoroughly, and at least some admitted to being part of a plot to attack the Allied leaders. But here's where the story becomes murky, where history blurs into legend and propaganda. Some accounts claim that a full team of German paratroopers was captured just outside Tehran, complete with weapons, explosives, and detailed plans of the conference venues. Other reports suggest that radio intercepts led Soviet agents to a safe house where they found maps, timing schedules, and assassination equipment. The most dramatic versions speak of a firefight in the streets, of German agents killed or captured in the act of preparing their attack. But when historians examine the evidence decades later, questions emerge. Where are the German after-action reports? Why did Otto Skorzeny, in his post-war memoirs, claim he was never ordered to execute such an operation? Why do some German military records make no mention of Operation Long Jump at all? The skeptics argue that Stalin fabricated or exaggerated the assassination plot for his own purposes. By uncovering a Nazi conspiracy, he could justify the massive security presence, demonstrate the superiority of Soviet intelligence, and position himself as Roosevelt's protector. After all, Stalin did convince Roosevelt to stay at the Soviet embassy rather than the American compound, citing security concerns. What better way to win the American president's trust than to save his life? But the believers point to other evidence. Kuznetsov's intelligence report was genuine. It exists in Soviet archives. German intelligence did have agents operating in Iran, that's documented fact. And Skorzeny's post-war denials might simply be an attempt to distance himself from a failed operation, especially since he was being tried for war crimes at the time. The truth, as it often does, likely lies somewhere in between. Was there a German plot to assassinate the Big Three in Tehran? Almost certainly yes. Hitler had the motive, Skorzeny had the capability, and the Germans had demonstrated their willingness to attempt audacious special operations. The basics of Operation Long Jump, infiltration, surveillance and planning, probably did occur. Did the plot come within seconds of success with heavily armed commandos poised to storm the embassies? Probably not. The security was too tight, the intelligence networks too active. If German agents were in Tehran, they would have quickly realized that any attempt on the Big Three was a suicide mission, with virtually no chance of success. Were Soviet and British intelligence instrumental in identifying and neutralizing the threat? Yes. Whether the threat was as immediate and dramatic as Soviet propaganda claimed, the counterintelligence work was real. Agents were arrested. Networks were rolled up. The Germans, if they were planning an operation, were forced to abandon it. The conference concludes on December 1, 1943. All three leaders depart Tehran safely. They will meet again at Yalta in 1945, but never again in such a potentially vulnerable location. The decisions made in Tehran will shape the invasion of Normandy, the final defeat of Nazi Germany, and the division of post-war Europe. And the men who might have tried to prevent that future, some are executed by Soviet security forces, others disappear into the chaos of war. Their stories are buried in classified files and unmarked grave. Music softens to reflective, contemplative tone. The aftermath of Operation Long Jump is as mysterious as the operation itself. Otto Skorzeny survives the war. He's captured by American forces in 1945 and put on trial for war crimes related to other operations, particularly his use of American uniforms during the Battle of the Bulge. Interestingly, he's acquitted of those charges. Even more interestingly, when questioned about Operation Long Jump, he consistently denies any direct involvement. "I heard rumors," he says, "but I never received concrete orders." Whether this is truth or carefully constructed plausible deniability, we'll never know for certain. Skorzeny escapes from an internment camp in 1948 and eventually flees to Spain, where he lives under Franco's protection. He becomes a businessman, a consultant, and according to some sources, continues to work for various intelligence services. He dies in 1975, taking whatever secrets he had to his grave. Ernst Kaltenbrunner, the head of Reich Security, isn't so fortunate. He's captured in 1945, tried at Nuremberg for crimes against humanity, and hanged in 1946. He never speaks publicly about Operation Long Jump. The Soviet intelligence officers who claim to have uncovered the plot are decorated as heroes. Some rise to prominent positions in the KGB. Others quietly retire, their service to the motherland officially recognized, but their specific actions remaining classified for decades. And Nikolai Kuznetsov, the spy whose intelligence may have started the entire counterintelligence operation, is posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. But his story remains classified until long after his death. When it's finally revealed, he becomes a legend in Russian intelligence circles, the man whose sharp ears and quick thinking might have saved the Big Three. So what really happened in Tehran in November 1943? The historical consensus, based on declassified documents from multiple countries, suggests the following. German intelligence did plan some kind of operation targeting the Tehran conference. Whether it was the full-scale assassination plot described in Soviet accounts or something more limited remains debated. Soviet and British intelligence did identify and neutralize German agents in Tehran before and during the conference. How many agents and how advanced their planning was varies depending on which sources you trust. But here's what we know for absolute certain. Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill met in Tehran. They left alive. They shaped the future. And somewhere in the shadows of that ancient city, silent battles were fought that never made the history books. The real legacy of Operation Long Jump isn't whether it was a massive conspiracy or a modest intelligence operation. The real legacy is what it represents. The shadow war within World War II, the secret battles fought by spies and counterintelligence officers, the plots and counterplots that shaped history as surely as any battlefield victory. In the grand narrative of the war, Tehran is remembered for the decisions made in conference rooms, the plans for D-Day, the agreements about Poland and Eastern Europe, the beginning of the alliance that would defeat Nazi Germany. But in the quieter corners of history, Tehran is remembered as the place where assassination met counterintelligence, where the hunters became the hunted, where one overheard conversation in a German officers' club might have changed everything. We'll never know with absolute certainty how close Operation Long Jump came to success. We'll never know if history truly hung on the whispers of one spy in a Tehran alley, but we do know this. In November 1943, the three most important men in the world gathered in one place. Their enemies knew where they were, and those enemies had the means and the motive to kill them. That they failed, whether through brilliant counterintelligence, sheer luck, or the impossibility of the task itself, means we live in the world we know today. A world shaped by the decisions made in Tehran, not by the chaos that would have followed if those decisions were never made. Operation Long Jump remains one of the great mysteries of World War II. Part history, part legend, part propaganda, part truth. It exists in that fascinating space where fact and myth intersect, where the documented evidence runs out and speculation begins, where every historian draws their own conclusions based on the same incomplete puzzle. But perhaps that's appropriate. After all, the entire world of espionage exists in shadows, in deniable operations and classified files, in agents whose names we'll never know and missions whose details remain hidden even decades later. Operation Long Jump, in its ambiguity and mystery, perfectly captures the reality of intelligence work during the war. And so the story endures, in books and documentaries, in debates between historians, in the eternal question. What if the plot had succeeded? What if Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill had died in Tehran? What if the alliance had fractured? What if the war had continued for years longer? What if the atomic bomb had been used in Europe instead of Japan? What if the world you know had never come to be? History turns on moments, on decisions made and paths not taken, on bullets fired and bullets never fired, on intelligence gathered and warnings heeded, on the invisible people who work in the shadows to shape the visible world. In November 1943, in the ancient city of Tehran, all the forces of espionage and counter-espionage, of assassination and protection, of plot and counterplot, converged on one moment in time. And when that moment passed, three men emerged alive to shape the future. The rest, as they say, is history, or is it legend? Perhaps in the end it's both.